Congratulations to 4 winners of our first WBC CEO award. It takes leadership. And as we were so proud to share yesterday between C200 and Catalyst and WBC, our first ever report on women CEOs. But today we know that the men join the women in driving change. It is our joy to introduce Robert Reiss and Becky Shamba, both on our WBC board, and those two who chair our CEO Executive Series. You today are remarkable leaders. Let us just take a minute to share about Robert Reiss, founder of the CEO Show and the host, and as you know, reaches over 10,000 CEOs out with his publication, the CEO Forum, and a driver for CEO leadership. He will in turn introduce Becky Shamba, who has just joined our board and pushes leadership, and her company named for leadership. Can we all stop and salute the CEO award winners today, our pride and our joy, and a little humility as we say, congratulations for this esteemed recognition, and just a shout out to your 4 companies that have over 100 people listening to you 4 on this call. Congratulations, the CEO award winners, WBC 2020, and to Robert Reiss.
Well, thank you so much, Edie, and welcome to the CEO panel by Women Business Collaborative. And I want to tee this up because it's really important. WBC's vision is equal position, pay, and power for all business women. And about 2013, I had a vision or a goal, which was that we needed to have 50 Fortune 500 women CEOs. And we tried. All of my platforms, I kept promoting it, but we didn't get there. And if you look now, we're at 39, and it's all happened over the last 18 months. Now, at the same time, over the last 18 months, WBC emerged. So is this coincidence? I say no. There's another C word, and that is collaborative. There's a collaborative of 41 organizations driving this forward, and this is women and men working in alignment. And when we do that, then we create a movement. Reminds me of what Mahatma Gandhi said, which is an eye for an eye makes the world blind. And really, what we need if we want to have vision is positivity. We need to share the best case studies. This year, as I've said many times before, it's unlike any other year. It's like combining 1918, 1929, and 1968 all rolled into one. So what we had to do is, through heavy criteria, determine who are the 4 best, who are the 4 companies who can shine a light and we can salute, and these are the ones who could carry the message forth. So we are going to be speaking with representing, and drum roll please, health insurance, Humana, and that's President and CEO Bruce Broussard. We're all, applauding and stuff in our virtual way. In hospitality, there you go, Edie. In hospitality, it's Marriott International and President and CEO Arne Sorenson. In financial services, it's Mastercard with Executive Vice Chair Anne Cairns. And then in pharmaceuticals, it's Eli Lilly. Applause, all of us. And that is Chair and CEO Dave Ricks. So when we look at this, this is the award that they are all winning. And I just want to show you. I mean, it's not only beautiful, this weighs about 10 pounds. WBC Leadership Award, Gender and Diversity Excellence. Congratulations to all.
Congratulations, everyone.
So now what we're going to do is we're going to share this information a lot. I'll be writing a Forbes article on October 21st, share it in the CEO Forum, which reaches the top 10,000 CEOs. But perhaps more significantly, I heard there's over 1,000 people in the audience here on this Zoom. And all of you, please listen in and listen to the great ideas shared by these leaders of how you can implement them in your organizations and others. So I want to introduce my co-host, partner in crime, you will love, Becky Shamba. And Becky, as you know, is a board member of WBC. Becky is a world-renowned leadership authority, keynote speaker, book writer, and I really met her. When I say met, it was like post-pandemic. So we've never actually met, although we've been working together every single month on CEO roundtables. So Becky, take it away.
All right, Robert, thank you so much for opening that up and I think framing what's going to be just a substantive and wonderful dialogue with our distinguished panelists today. And congratulations to all of you. It's an honor to be a part of the WBC board. It's an honor to be a part of the summit. And it's a true honor to work with you, Robert, and to really collaborate with, I think, just some great organizations who really are the role model for gender equity and diversity. So let's get started. Broussard, thank you so much for carving out the time and being with us. And
thanks for having us.
yeah, and I just want to say hats off. Thank you so much for Humana, for their sponsorship and support for this summit. We really, really appreciate it. Means a lot.
It's an important initiative.
Absolutely. And so there's so much we could talk about with everybody, but let me just slice it down and get real specific. You know, everybody knows that any real change has to have executive leadership commitment. And I, just noted that, Humana was named as one of the top companies in Diversity Inc., who I believe the figures came up almost from 20 some points in terms of their increase in the participation and representation of diverse talent in just 1 year. In fact, you were the fastest growing company who was a participant in this survey. So congratulations to that. And let's face it, it just doesn't happen, right? It's a lot of hard work. But let me go back to leadership executive commitment. And it starts with you, right? And so what inspired you, just as a personal question, but I'd just be very curious to know, what inspired you personally back when that has allowed you to demonstrate this, sort of persistence and commitment to stay at this, women in equity at Humana?
Becky, there's really two philosophies that we've embraced, and one is around the fact that people that are in power need to reduce the barriers for individuals that are less represented, and I think we have that obligation. And as you can see from David and Arne and Anne, this is, I'm not the only one that's doing this, and I think it's just one thing that we should do as leaders. The second thing is diversity is really good business. I mean, there's no other way to say that. And what I mean by that is the fact that diversity of thought, when you have a challenge in the organization or you have initiatives that you are doing, having a diversity of thought is really, really important because you get a representation from all different points of view. And that, to me, has made us a better company. We call it healthy tensions in the organization, where one person has one perspective in a context from another. And so this idea of diversity is both the moral right thing to do. As leaders, we need to do it. But secondarily, it has a lot of practicality in the business world.
Was there anything personal in your life that growing up that you saw things metaphorically as important around equity and opportunities for all that has impacted you to really drive accountability now at Humana? Anything that speaks out to that?
You know, I fortunate or unfortunately, I came from a very under-resourced family, and a family that you know, was always having to struggle, and seeing the struggles that I had to go through, it sort of said I need to take this on as a leader to really reduce those barriers for others so that they can become elevated and have the success that is equal to others in our country and in our world. And there are barriers. I know that people feel we're an equal equality organization. I mean, a country, but we have significant barriers that we have to knock down to allow people to really have that equality that we're all looking for.
And when you talk about those barriers, Bruce, you've been one of the first CEOs to sign for Action and Diversity, and you've somehow turned from conversation to action, and now you've accountability built in. How do you really do that?
A few things on the accountability. I think the thing I look at is accountability. You got to measure it, and then in addition, you also need to sponsor it. And those are three areas where I look at as being really important. On the accountability, it's at multiple levels. I mean, one is if you look at our executive compensation and the incentive comp specifically, I have the opportunity to adjust compensation based on diversity. And so we incorporate it in our compensation decisions every year. And so that sends a message of the importance of it. The second thing is that we do probably very similar to others on this call of ensuring that every slate is diverse, that we put diverse slates on there, that we also hold people accountable to the numbers from the point of view of what does their diversity look like. And that includes a very active talent review that is specifically around diversity, as opposed to just the overall organization. We look at the diversity side. And then the last thing is really, you know, walking what you see in the talk here. And for me, sponsorship is a really important part of what we do. And so I actively sponsor both females, but also diverse candidates in total through multiple different ways. And I find that sponsorship makes me a better person, because I learn from them and help them and personally understand their needs. But secondarily, obviously, it makes the company a better person, a better company, but it makes the individual really, really be able to advance.
Thank you, Bruce. Back to you, Becky.
Great. The next question, I guess, is how do you know that you've been successful? Is there anything you've measured that you would say, wow, this has really paid off?
I hate to say, Becky, we're on to our next speaker.
Oh, we're done. Okay.
Yeah,
well, Bruce,
so fast.
This is how we keep each other in check.
We'll be back in the group.
But I'm sure Arne and David.
You know, another time, Bruce. I had another question for you there.
Arne's up.
All right, Arne. Okay, Arne. Well, let me just say, Arne, it's always great to engage with you, and it's an honor to have you here. I will say that Marriott International has been a pioneer in this whole topic around diversity, inclusion, and gender equity for many, many years within hospitality, but also has been a model for other organizations to follow. So thank you for that, number one. And I know this has been a big part of your life's work as the CEO, president of Marriott International. So if I think about Marriott, you know, you've really put your teeth into this, and I think the hard work has really paid off. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think about 50% of your personal direct reports are women, and about 47% of the women in the US are VPs, and about 45% of VPs are women globally. I hope I got those numbers pretty correct, but either way, that's really significant. Since you've taken on the role, which has been some years at Marriott International as the president CEO, has it always been that way, or have you seen a trend upward? And give us your thoughts. I'm curious to know, why has that happened? What are some of the top 2 or 3 things that have driven that gender balance within the organization?
Well, thanks, Becky. Appreciate the opportunity to be with all of you, and congratulations to Bruce and Anne and Dave. I'm honored to be sharing the panel with you and the hoisting of that very heavy trophy. So thanks very much. It's great to be here. Marriott, of course, has had a long tradition of being focused on our people and creating opportunity for our people. We're in an industry in which literally we come from everywhere. every walk of life, every identity, and we welcome a group of people every day into our hotels from everywhere. And to thrive in that business, I think requires a certain mindset about creating opportunity for everyone. We have been focused on this for a long time. Sometimes it was before the language we use today, but 20 years ago, we started a board and management committee that was focused on inclusiveness. And from that point on, we've been setting targets against diverse goals. Your statistics are close to right. My direct reports have been 50-50 by gender for many of the last 8 years, the period of time I've been CEO. We're one off today because I had one of our great women executives retire last year, but as of the first of the year, we'll be back to 50-50. And in the larger group of about 800 or 900 of the most senior folks in the company, which is global, not just United States, we're at about 42%. We've got a target for 2025 of getting to gender parity. I'd echo some of the things that Bruce talked about, but obviously setting targets and measuring against those targets is a fundamentally important thing. I think one of the second things that's really important and comes up frequently in the way I think about it, I was on a panel like this a few years ago, and the host or the moderator was trying to be somewhat provocative and said, Arne, shouldn't we just face facts and lower standards so we could get more women in executive leadership? And I said, well, I know it's your job to be provocative, but I wouldn't say we should lower our standards for women differently than we lower our standards for men. Standards were lowered when I became CFO of Marriott. I did not have a record that allowed Bill Marriott to check every box and say, I know that this person has shown, by the way, I had not been CFO, so how could I have shown? But he cannot show that he's met every one of those boxes. And somehow when we get to diverse candidates, we get to women candidates, we think, well, wait a second, they can't check that one box. Well, we don't require that of men either. And so it's not that we should lower standards differently. It is that we need to make the same bet on women as we do on men. We want them to succeed. If we engage in tokenism and pick people who will not succeed in those jobs, we'll actually set the cause back. We need to pick people who we think will succeed. And then the last thing I think is important is success begets success. When women see other senior women leaders in the company, they know without having to debate it that there's an opportunity for them to succeed. Of course, the pinnacle of that is CEO. I'm not a woman, I'm not diverse. And hopefully one day that this position will be filled by somebody who brings that diversity. But we do have extraordinary women leaders in the company. And as a consequence, women can see that and say, I know I can succeed in this place. And that's helpful.
So a question is, you've a really large organization. I can't even keep track anymore, but I'm guessing could be about 300,000 people. And you have a plan for 2025 total gender parity. How do you maneuver such a large organization to get those results?
Well, we have, it can be bigger or smaller depending on how technical you are with the count. Before the pandemic, we thought we had 750,000 people that wore our name badge every day. Now that includes entry level in the hotels all the way up through my job. The biggest challenges are above entry level. Entry level, we're actually more women than men. Sometimes that's because some of these jobs, housekeeping, take as an example, are often populated by more women than by men. But it is a question of how do you take those groups and the early management groups and all the way up to the senior ranks and make sure you're creating opportunity above that. And of course, the more senior you get, the smaller the numbers get, and to some extent, the more influence you get. But it requires measuring all the way through the organization. It requires doing something that Bruce talked about, which is to say, every slate for a promotion or for filling a new job ought to be diverse. You don't have a slate that allows you to proceed unless it is diverse. And you use tools like that to make sure that you're getting the kind of consideration that you need to have.
And I think therein lies probably why Marriott's so successful. I remember Mr. Marriott once telling me the key is you have to decide to decide. So right. Thank you. We are now ready to move Becky on to.
Great. Anne, welcome. Thank you so much. It's great to be with you today and to be a part of this great dialogue on gender equity. So thank you. And I want to just say that, I mean, you've been an active participant in the gender equity space. I have observed you being in the room with women talent leaders, aspiring women leaders, high potential leaders. You've mentored them. You've been the leader and had the vision for Mastercard internally in terms of moving the needle and putting in practices to really achieve the things you've achieved. You've also been very active and involved in the community, in the marketplace, as the chair of the 30% Club, right? Which we know is a global campaign to accelerate women, diverse population of women in boards and C-suite and beyond. So thank you for that. I just wanted to note something that I think so many companies aspire to, that Mastercard has done, is that pay equity. And this is just a recent analysis, but women earn the same on the dollar as men earn on the dollar. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
So, well, congratulations to that, by the way. So I'm going to turn it over to you, but I think Mastercard has taken more of a systemic approach internally and externally. I'd just love to hear your view on that and maybe get a little more specific to get your guidance on how you've been able to do that and what the impact is on some of the approaches that Mastercard has taken.
Well, thanks a lot, Becky. And absolutely, we take a pretty holistic approach to the whole idea of gender balance. And we started thinking about it about 7 years ago and said, you know, can we put some framework that we can work to across the company? We're in over 200 countries and we've got like over 2 billion people out there using our products and services. And when we looked at it, we said, well, maybe we should think about it under 3 pillars. And we think about it in terms of what we're doing for our people, what we're doing for our markets, and what we do for society at large. And actually, this turned out to be a really good way of looking at what we were doing because it really focused our mind. So, for example, for our people, you've mentioned about the pay equity, but new things that we've done recently is roll out consistent maternity and paternity leave of 4 months full pay everywhere in the world in over 200 countries. And I love that because I think that sends such a great message to the men about caring for their families. The majority of our men take their full leave. And also, when you're looking at a man and a woman inside the organization, you're thinking of them as parents, not, oh, here's a woman who's going to have a baby. Just here's a young person who's going to be a parent. It levels up the playing field. Then we think about what do we do about our products and services? Well, it's a natural for us to design for women. 85% of the world's buying decisions, the day-to-day buying decisions, are made by women. So all of our marketing, the way that we design our products, we're thinking of that as we put everything together. And lastly, the third pillar is society. And we've been very fortunate that we've been a profitable company with a great balance sheet, and we've been able to create a center for inclusive growth, where we've been able to invest in projects that allow us to roll out capabilities across society. And we've done things such as, you know, work with the whole of the financial inclusion community to bring 500 million people into the financial system that were excluded before in the last 5 years, and a fair proportion of them are women. Recently, we've set a new goal where we've said we want to reach 50 million more small to medium-sized business leaders than we do today. And instead of just setting the goals so that the natural course of events would be about a third of those would be women, because women control about 111 million companies around the world. We said, no, we're going to make it 50-50 women. So let's go for 25 million more women, small business owners. And it's lovely when you can be a big corporation and set goals like that. And now we've taken that framework and we're applying it across America to actually help Black Americans bridge that gap that that is existing there, thinking about what we do for our people. We've set new goals to have double the number of senior Black people in our company, what we're doing in terms of building our products, helping SMEs, helping business leaders, introducing what we can do in terms of digitization, and what we can do for society, rolling out new programs through cities across America. So it's really great framework, and it all started with gender and is moving to wider diversity.
And that's really wonderful, Anne. So you have been a societal brand, what you're doing for Black small businesses, women small businesses. What is your vision for changing the world? What Mastercard is going to do?
Well, I mean, obviously that we believe that, you know, a better world is an equitable world. And in order to be able to change the world, you have to be working with so many different partners everywhere on the planet. And that means you're working with governments, you're working with other businesses, and you're building things that are actually needed on the ground. And I think things, you know, when you think about what's needed for the world in future, things like digital identity will be really needed. If I'm a young woman born in Africa, I don't have a passport. I'm probably not even registered at birth. I certainly won't have a driver's license. So how do people know who I am? And yet to get access to things like the medication that, you know, may be provided by the big pharmaceutical companies, vaccines, for example, are needed in the future, then I'll need something that says who I am. And we need to bridge that divide through things like giving digital identity. With a digital identity, you will be able to have a financial identity and many other things besides. So I think that's the kind of thing that we need to think about for the future to change the world and level everything up.
I commend you on that. And speaking about when you talked about drug companies, pharmaceutical companies, the real leaders, no one has done anything like Eli Lilly has done. And I want to talk with you. This is Dave Ricks. Want to ask you, we've spoken before about the journeys, and you've really been the pioneer in creating journeys, I think first with women journeys, yes, but you've moved them into so many different areas. How has this impacted women? Because you're really far down the path at Eli Lilly. You're ahead of so many companies that I speak with all the time.
We are, and thank you for having me here. Thanks for the award. And I just want to say before I go in, this award is really for so many people who I get to represent today at Lilly, who are making the change happen. We sponsor it at our level, but I just want to thank all the women at Lilly who've really helped us see what we could be and advance the cause of women in leadership at our company. The women's journey was a big unlock for us, and it's an actionable and replicatable practice that any company could do. We had for years, maybe like a lot of companies, been on the path of good intentions and happy talk as it relates to diversity and inclusion, and frankly hadn't made a lot of real progress. And I think for me, the women's journey was a way to cut the problem a different way, rather than looking at generalized data about how women experience our workplace. We followed specific women through their pathway to identify the tensions and problems they experience. And as you're pointing out, we've now done this for African Americans, for Asian populations, for Latinos, Latinx population, and we just completed our LGBTQ journey, which has been fascinating as well, particularly in a conservative state like Indiana, and we have a lot of opportunity to improve as a workplace there. But it moved us from this idea that this change management problem of inclusion in the workplace was one that we attack by changing what people think, and therefore they'll act differently, to one really where we decided we needed to change what we were doing, change the action, and then that would change the thinking. And it unlocked that for us. And we've done a number of things to fundamentally shift how we staff jobs, develop talent, develop women that were unlocked through this journey discovery process. And since we've done this, this journey, I'll just give you one statistic. Right before we started, I asked a simple question, which was, how long to gender parity at Lilly at the current rate? And the answer in 2015 was 77 years. That sounds horrible. At the time, we had 36% women in management. But I bet if we looked at a lot of the Fortune 500 today, it's not much different. We needed to fundamentally change the rate of change. And the Women's Journey helped us achieve that. We do now expect to have gender parity in the company in the next decade. And this tool really helped us kind of unlock the new solutions.
Great.
So Dave, with that in, and I just want to jump in real quick here, Robert, if you don't mind. I'm curious, what was the most, what surprised you the most, or what has surprised you the most around these listening tours or this journey with, you know, multi different demographics? Does anything stand out that really has helped you to create a bold, you know, sort of call to action?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that really activated us. And first of all, the process itself is very different from looking at employee survey data where you say, okay, well, 62% of the women are satisfied and 64% of the men. Why is that? It's very difficult to act upon that. In this case, we actually took blinded individual stories and walked the whole executive team through them about situations where women felt like they couldn't be at their best in the workplace, or they were through, you know, I think misplaced social norms, not listened to and not given advancement as a result. And by doing that through individual stories, it really animates the problem. It creates empathy. And by the way, we made it mandatory for all employees to go through the journey work in a program across the company. We've done that for each one. And that empathy, I think, just opened up a kind of a new way to look at the problem from the top of the company. We also then did a number of things which best companies on this call and other great companies in diversity had started to do. We set targets and metrics for women in leadership, and we hold our team accountable. We didn't set a far off parity goal. What we do is we set a 2-year goal by division for improvement. And then like Bruce had mentioned, we hold our leaders accountable for progress to that goal. We have diverse slates as a systematic process now, for instance. And then I think one thing that was mentioned with sponsorship is key is we created a diverse, not just women, but diverse talent sponsorship program where every member of my team sponsors every year 3 people, gets to know them very personally, gets engaged in their career. And these are people who work for them. And I think that's a very important thing is you have a personal stake in their success because when they win, you win because they're in your part of the business. I think that's really changed our pipeline now. And our pipeline now for CEO and senior leadership at the top of the company is at least 50-50. It might be a little bit more women than men just in the last 4-year period of time. We've really been able to see new talent in new ways.
Well, you're really moving the needle forward, and it's a lot for everyone to learn to start following this. So let's now shift from individual interviews to group interview. So we're going to start off, and Becky, you're going to be talking about vision.
All right. Well, in the spirit of collaboration, this last part of our panelist engagement is to really get together and engage in a rich dialogue around a couple, perhaps, questions. And given that the WBC charter and culture is around the spirit of collaboration, let's talk about the movement in terms of your vision, which a lot of you have somewhat articulated. But I just want to pose this question. And what have you seen, and why do we need to continue to cultivate this force of a societal movement? And I think you mentioned this won't happen in terms of achieving gender equity. We can wait for 70 years, but that's not going to work, right? It's going to take the collaborative, sort of powerful force of partners together in our communities and our society, across industries and beyond, I think, to be the force for real change and to accelerate change. So talk to us about this. What needs to happen, or what are you doing to really be creating this catalyst for a societal movement? You know, organizations working across the different lines to really be the force of change.
So I mentioned that I believe partnership's really important, and we're fortunate because Mastercard is a huge global network, and it reaches, as I said, over 2 billion people. So we reach into so many different consumers all over the world, but also we connect up over 27,000 banks to something like over 50 million merchants, places where you buy things. And when you have this power of this kind of network, then you can actually all work together to solve real problems. I'll give you an example. If I'm a woman and I'm trying to run a small business, for example, a shop in Africa, the shops in Kenya are called dukas. I usually don't have any property for collateral. I find it really difficult then to get a bank loan from my local bank because there's nothing to base that on. So how do I actually run my business and grow my business? Well, one of the ways that we did that was to partner up with Unilever. Unilever were providing the goods to the small shopkeepers, and we digitized Unilever's data of the business right through from their supply chain to the person coming into the shop to buy the goods. And we showed that data to the local banks and said, these are really good businesses. You can lend on the basis of this data. And the local bank said, okay. And they actually stepped in and started giving loans. And as a result of that, thousands of these shops, tens of thousands, increased their turnover by about 20%, even in a few months. And this is a fantastic example of a collaboration between a big supplier, small shopkeepers, a digital tech company, the finance arm through the banks, solving a society problem where the owners of the shops had no access to finance. So that's collaboration.
And I love that story. It's connecting the dots, right? I mean, some of these things are right in front of us, but it's having the creativity and the intention to really look what's around us to connect this integrated force of different communities to support. I love that. Anybody else have any examples or ideas there?
Becky, I'll build on what Anne was saying, just on these ideas of partnerships. And I think every business has that opportunity in the ecosystem that they operate, and we operate obviously in the healthcare system, and both as a result of providers not being diverse in the healthcare system. You have this primarily white-oriented population, and then secondarily, you also have inequities, health inequities, because it's been proven over and over that if people are similar in culture, they engage more in their health through the provider side. So what we've done similar is we started partnering with universities to help support and get people into schools that are for their residency on the medical side. And we also see partnerships in our communities that we serve in helping individuals be able to get better skill sets and more contemporary skill sets today, and being able to be able to elevate in their job both in our community and in addition in our company. So this idea of partnership, I think, Anne, is a wonderful example where we can help inside our organization, but with the strength of the size of the organization and the ecosystems that we have, whether it's our local community or our business community, you're going to have an impact.
That's a great example, Bruce. I love that. They're kind of building upon Anne's, story around the partnerships.
Yeah.
Arne or Dave, do you have any other comments on that? Any thoughts?
I think one thing that can be added here is the importance of organizations like WBC. I remember years ago being in Germany for a CEO.
Arne, could you just say that one more time so everyone hears that sentence?
The importance of organizations like WBC. I remember being in Germany for a CEO conference a decade ago, maybe a little bit longer. And I think it was a labor minister of the German government who was on a panel right before me or right after me. And the conversation was about women members of boards of directors of German companies. And she was advocating that the government ought to set quotas. And of course, the CEOs in the room, mostly men, overwhelmingly men, said what is often said about quotas, which is they're a blunt instrument. They force us to make decisions other than we should make. We don't need quotas, arguments like that. And she said, we've been talking about this for nearly 20 years and the statistics have not moved. We cannot be satisfied with the fact that the statistics are not moving. And so we've got to do something to cause movement. And I think that, part of this is encouragement, not shame, but having external voices measure this is important. I'm convinced that it is in Marriott's selfish interest to have opportunity for all of our people, women and men and people from every race and background, because they will perform better in their jobs if they know that they can succeed with us. But I'm also convinced that society will be stronger, our economy will be stronger, if people outside of Marriott feel the same way. And I think that's more likely to be the case if all employers are setting similar kinds of targets and having similar kind of success. And so having organizations that shine a light on this and give us tools to encourage us or give us pressure to make sure that we're adopting and adapting as quickly as we possibly can, I think is a really good thing. And it will move us all forward in a way that we can be proud of.
Arne, thank you for that.
Quick one here from our end. We're working hard in Indianapolis with a group of the corporate community here partnership on two things that may be applicable to other companies. One is moving the needle on diversity and inclusion. And to be frank, this came up not thinking about women, but of the Black business situation here, but it could apply across all forms of diversity. And that is to have a method by which we collectively, big companies, collectively change how we buy things and have a scorecard for the community we purchase from, which are typically smaller businesses. And I think if you looked at the spectrum of who's making the most progress the most quickly on diversity and inclusion, it's probably larger companies that are well capitalized and strategic. And the smaller the entity, the worse it becomes. So in this way, we can pull our supply chain network with us. And we want to do this across the whole of the community because we actually share a lot of suppliers, whether it be building services or transportation or other things. So that's an initiative we're getting going now. And I think I'm excited to see what that could produce.
Okay, so now we're going to shift over, final round, and we're going to talk about action. We've given a lot of ideas. I want to start this off, no monologues on this. To start, what I want is a maximum three-word phrase. And this is the advice you would give to CEOs. We're trying to create a movement. We know the input is collaboration, the output is a movement. What is the advice you have to CEOs? Maximum 3 words. You could take it.
I'll do 2 words, Robert. Accountability and sponsorship.
Oh, there you go. Okay. And by the way, I have to say, I love this concept of healthy tensions. I'm going to talk more about that in the future. That's really cool.
Maybe building on that, I can jump in. I think for us, I'd use 2 words: get uncomfortable. If the solutions are comfortable, they won't create change.
That sort of ties into the healthy tensions. We're
Yes,
hearing
it does,
similar.
yeah.
Okay, what do you have? Anne, you want to go? Up to 3-word phase.
Transparency, reporting.
Transparency. Arne.
Set targets.
Set targets. And then you achieve the targets, right? But you have to set them first.
I couldn't fit this in 3 words, but set targets and measure at your table.
Yes.
There you go.
If you set a target and then let it go and don't revisit it, it won't be taken seriously. If you set a target and say, my direct reports are going to come in regularly, multiple times a year, and report on how we're doing against those targets, they'll know that not only is the target there, but it's important.
And that's amazing. You've gone through, this is a tough week for hospitality. It's amazing, but amazing how you maintain your leadership and your coolness in all of this. Anyone else have ideas they want to hear from any other panelist or share anything else? Here's what it's come down to. Action. We want advice to CEOs. Anne, was that you're ready to give your final advice to CEOs?
Well, you know, it's my 30% club role. I deal with over 1,200 members, and they're all CEOs and chairmen of some of the biggest companies in the world. And we don't have mandates. We have goals, which are aspirational goals. But I think the fact that the CEOs and the chairs sign up for these, and that's 30% over 30% women on their boards, 30% women on their excos. In the UK now, it includes people of color. They are all signed up for it. And I think that by having aspirational targets, what you've done is got a culture change where people's hearts and minds are going to make that happen.
Yeah.
I think that's better than mandates, and I think it can work.
Yeah, we're hearing a lot of similar things. Who else? Final words, advice to CEOs.
Yeah, I would just finish how I started out. We have a responsibility as leaders to take this on, and both because it's the right thing to do and because we are in a position to influence. And I just feel it's the heart and mind to this, and I just feel that we need to take this on. This is the right thing to do, and we can make it happen because of where we sit.
I'm going to shift gears now. Dave and Arne, I'm going to give you a different question to end on. But not everyone listening in out of 1,000 people here are CEOs, but a lot of them are going to be super inspired, want to go back, and they're going to be going up the ladder, trying to get to their CEO, inspiring maybe their executive VP. And what advice do you have to those people on how they could bring this movement and collaboration of gender equity throughout their organization, and what do they have to do to go up the flagpole?
Well, I would say, I agree with Bruce that leaders really need to carry at least 51% of this. But we were moved by a group of women who were courageous, who made us a little uncomfortable, and in some ways risked, their own credibility. And so it's easier to play the game and play it safe. They wanted to see change in a company they cared about, and they pushed us. There's a right way to do that. And I think with our Journey project, that's a tool people could replicate and use to get into the conversation. But it does take some courage. If your company's not making the kind of change you want to see, you can push and get good results. Women in my company pushed me, and it's made a real change.
Okay, and I want to commend you on those journeys. Terrific. So, Arne, you're going to be our final say. You said you could have at certain points up to 750,000 associates. You have almost a mini country you're dealing with here. How do you get this? Someone listening in, they want to go back to their company and they want to inspire someone. How do they reach an Arne Sorenson? How do they inspire them?
I'll answer that before I finish, but there's one thing I want to sort of add to this conversation, and it is fundamentally important that we see diverse leadership, that we see it on our boards of directors, that we see it in the CEO ranks across industry, that we see it in senior leadership ranks. We measure against those things, we set targets against those things, because those are the indications to everybody that I can succeed no matter who I am. It's also fundamentally important that we respect all of the people who are working for us. And Bruce, I think, has got a highly diverse workforce. We have a highly diverse workforce. It's too easy sometimes to take for granted those who we don't measure, who are laboring on the front lines of our workforce every single day, who don't make big incomes maybe, who don't have fancy degrees. And every one of them has a natural right to be treated with human dignity and with respect, and care about how they succeed in their careers as well. And I think that is fundamental across the system, because it's actually more fundamental than how we recognize senior folks, because if we don't have that, we're not going to recognize the feeder talent into that senior ranks. But for your question, how do I go back? I'm not the CEO. Maybe I'm not even senior in the company and influence these results. You go back and say, what is the data in our company? If it's about gender, what is the data about our gender? And the answer to that question should lead your second question. What's our plan? What's your vision? What's your target? Those are not hostile questions. Those are questions that can be asked quite simply and directly. And depending on what the answer is to that first question, it will motivate what that second one is. And if the stats are bad, and they'll be obvious if they're bad, the obvious question of, well, what's our target? How much better do we want to be? And of course, if there's no answer to that question, the third question is, shouldn't we know?
And
Should-
that is great. Becky is about to sum up, but I love that you gave that step of the plan of what everyone needs to do. And I'm reminded when Rosa Parks said, to bring about change, you must take the first step. All of you have taken the first step, and I commend you on this. Becky, wrap it up.
All right. Wow. What a great dialogue. We could have had, wish we would have had a lot more time, but you guys were point on. I will say you are the real deal. And we thank you for modeling the best practices, some concrete solutions, so much to take away from this. Bruce, I think, we all know, and you reiterated what gets done gets measured, right? Arne, I love this whole thing that success breeds success. I will believe if I see other women that are like me, I know it's possible. And you know what? I'm going to go for it, right? I think, Dave, embrace the journey. Don't assume, assess, right? And then be prescriptive about what you can find. So I thank you all. And I think what's important around this dialogue is these people that have joined us today and taken the time have committed, and they've moved from conversation to action. So we invite you to think about, what are you going to commit to today, and what action, being a sponsor, taking the lead on a council to really make some movement around practices within your organization, getting involved in the community, right? What can you do to really take action in the next 30 days to 60 days? Anne said, it takes a holistic view around people, right? Around the markets, around society. So there's a lot of opportunities here that we can jump in, because the more that we can commit and take the action like all of us have today, the more that we will be the change that we really want to see. So thank you all.